Formula One on 5 Live.
Hello and welcome to Silverstone Circuit. We're back in the United Kingdom for the 11th round of the 2023 Formula One World Championship. It's Rosanna Tennant with you down in the F1 paddock as we get ready for the third and final practice session. We're back to a conventional race weekend format this weekend. Just a week ago, we were racing in Austria where we had a sprint weekend format. But this weekend, back to 3 practice sessions, plenty of time for the teams and drivers to get up to speed with this historic track. Up in the commentary box, I'm joined by lead commentator Harry Benjamin and former Mercedes reserve driver Sam Bird. Good morning, guys. Look, earlier on when we were making our way into the circuit, there was rain here. It is a classic British summer weekend. We had scorching temperatures of 28, 29 degrees yesterday. It's a little cooler, it's a little cloudy, and there's rain in the air. Harry Benjamin, how's that going to affect this third practice session?
Well, we definitely had rain this morning. It's dried out since, but as I look at the timing screen in front of me, the risk of rain for this third practice session is 90%. And overlooking the pit lane that we do, the grandstands are full and there are very ominous grey, dark grey skies that are making their way closer and closer to the track. It's going to be interesting, particularly for the likes of Charles Leclerc, who didn't get any dry running yesterday in FP2 with an electrical issue. So if we do get rain for this session, it's going to put him on the back foot because he's going to be lacking that dry running. And we think Sunday is most likely going to be dry. So it's a bit of a step into the unknown.
Talking of steps into the unknown, Sam Bird, just before I headed down to the F1 paddock, you and I were chatting about Mercedes, a really big unknown this weekend. They couldn't seem to get it together yesterday on the softer tyre heading around the track, but they're a bit more confident on the medium and the hard tyres. What's going on there? It all seemed a bit confusing yesterday with both drivers not making it into the top 10 in either of the sessions, FP1 or FP2.
Yeah, you've literally stolen my words, Rosanna. I was going to say I'm completely confused about their pace. You know, you go back to Barcelona, you thought, wow, they're making some inroads with their 2023 package, but the last 2 races have been, well, this race weekend so far and Austria have been really challenging and difficult for them. They seem to lack quite a lot of pace. Okay, the long run pace on the soft tyre yesterday was encouraging, but they are way off where they want to be in terms of qualifying performance right now.
Also joining us in the commentary box for FP3 is BBC Sports chief F1 writer Andrew Benson. Andrew, yesterday we had some sort of surprise results, especially from Williams. Alex Albon up in P3 and FP1, and again in FP2. We're all scratching our heads thinking, my goodness me, is this upgrade finally paying dividends for Williams in a big way? Or should we not get too excited that the British team is making waves in front of the home crowd?
Well, Rosanna, I think both of those things are true. The upgrade is paying dividends, but we shouldn't get too excited at the same time. I think, you know, practice, the problem with it is that people can run different fuel loads. I mean, they could do that in qualifying too, but obviously if you run more fuel, you're going to be slower, as you are in practice. But I think what we saw yesterday was Williams, yes, they're definitely making steps forward. But that was a disproportionate step forward, if you like. I don't expect them to be 3rd and 5th at the end of qualifying today, but they are in a position, James Vowles, the team principal, said yesterday, where they can look, if they do a perfect job each weekend, they can look to get a car into the top 10 in the points, that is.
Yeah, lots to look out for that team. I think their future's looking bright. It's just a little bit stuttery to get going, isn't it? So we've got several teams racing on home soil. I mean, it's a stone's throw to Aston Martin, just across Dadford Road from Silverstone Circuit. And 4, I like to say, British drivers racing on home soil. Lando Norris, George Russell, Lewis Hamilton and Alex Albon. Harry, you've got a great vantage point up in the commentary box overlooking the start-finish straight. The grandstands have been packed since Thursday. We're expecting close to 500,000 fans at the circuit over the course of the weekend. I would say, from my experience yesterday in the pit lane looking out, there are a lot of home fans here. But who are they going to be treated to in terms of the best British performance this weekend, do you think?
Oh, that's a hard one to say. We've been talking about this obviously all weekend long so far, and there's a lot of LH44 fans that I can see outside the commentary box. There's even a couple of Albon fans as well, along with George Russell. But Lando Norris, there's a lot of fluorescent caps and papaya orange dotted around the grandstands in front of us on the main straight, and off the back of an amazing result for him in Austria, best result of the season so far with a 4th place finish after the track limits penalty. He moved up a spot. New upgrade package for him as well, introduced in Austria. He's been giving a little bit extra as well this weekend, but we didn't quite see much of it in FP1 and FP2, so we're still not quite sure where Norris and McLaren might well be. Piastri, though, on the other hand, first time he got the upgrade, was showing some pace, so I think there is hope that we could well see Lando Norris as the British hope. I'll put him at the top of the list.
Oh, there you go. I knew you'd get to your prediction eventually. Well, we've got a green light and FP3 is underway. We are at 59.33 seconds to go on this hour session. I'm going to hand it up to you guys to talk us through the next 59 and 27 seconds of this session.
Thank you very much, Rosanna Tennant. Yes, Fernando Alonso is making his way around now. And speak of Norris, here he is.
Stop the car.
And that is not a good start for Lando Norris then, who is at the end of the pit lane. He's just pulled off to the right, being told to stop the car. He's having a look in his mirrors, and there's a mechanic who has run down to give him the thumbs up and just hold him for a moment while the other Aston Martin of Lance Stroll goes by. So, panic over for the time being. Norris back up and running.
So it looks like the mechanics had actually left something on the back of Lando Norris's car. I'm not sure what that component is or does, but there was certainly something underneath the rear wing or on the crash structure at the back of the car, and they've spotted that, got him to stop the car. No harm done. He'll be fine for the remainder of the session.
Well, before we get into the nitty-gritty of it, here is how the championship standings lie. Max Verstappen, 6 poles, 7 wins to his name so far this season, has a massive 81-point gap at the top with 229 points to his name. Sergio Perez in second. Then comes Fernando Alonso, only 17 points behind the Mexican. Hamilton and Carlos Sainz round out the top 5. And then in the constructors' standings, well, it's Red Bull who have won every single race so far this year with 377 points to their name. That is a 199-point gap they have to Mercedes and Aston Martin, which is a really tight fight for second. Just 3 points between those two constructors, and Ferrari closing in as well with Alpine rounding out the top 5. So we say it a lot, you take Red Bull and Max Verstappen out of the equation and it is a rather tasty fight. But as we alluded to at the start of the show, Sam, Mercedes and actually Aston Martin, a little bit underwhelming in Austria, a little bit underwhelming so far in Silverstone.
I don't think yesterday was a fair reflection of where Fernando Alonso's pace is. I think that he's a lot closer than what it showed yesterday. Yesterday he spent a lot of the day with a small issue in FP1, and then he was kind of fighting that issue all the time in terms of getting back on track with other people in the groove. When people were on the softs, he was on the hards, and it never really fell for him in terms of lap time. But make no mistake, he'll be there when it matters this afternoon. I expect to see him fighting in and around the Ferraris for what I think will be the second and third row of the grid.
Well, Ferrari had one man down in FP2 yesterday, with Charles Leclerc confined to the garage with electrical issues as Carlos Sainz begins to wind up for his first flyer. Andrew, do we know much more about the issues that Charles Leclerc was facing and how Ferrari have dealt with that?
Only that it was an electrical issue and that they've now dealt with it.
All right then, there we go. 56 minutes left. And 20 seconds, 90, 18, for those who wish to do a sync. But Sainz is making his way around right now. He is out there, and Charles Leclerc is also out there. They are both on the soft compound of tyre. And pretty much everybody else is on the mediums, bar Piastri and Alonso, who are just on their outlaps right now. Sargent, Magnussen, Albon, Zhou, Hülkenberg, Hamilton, Russell and Bottas are still in the pits. One of the big complaints on the radio from all drivers yesterday, Sam, was grip and wind. Now, the weather is a little bit worse today, but ideally should be a bit grippier now we've had a lot more track running out there.
We have indeed. I think that by the time we get to qualifying, hopefully the grip level will be better. Hopefully we won't have too much more rain, although they are saying 90% chance of rain during this session. As we see the clouds above us actually look very, very dark, don't they? The grip level yesterday was very strange, though. Everybody really complaining, and the Mercedes looking very, very weak at the rear of the car. No traction. We saw the AlphaTauri spinning as well of Nick de Vries. A lot of people struggling out there for grip.
Certainly is. Well, first lap times are starting to come in now. Verstappen goes fastest. He's on the medium compound of tyre, a 1:28.8, and Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari has just come across the line on the soft compound of tyre, a 1:29 dead in front of his teammate, only by 44 hundredths. Sainz in third, Perez fourth, Norris the top five, Ocon, Gasly, Tsunoda and De Vries, the 9 drivers who have set lap times so far. Now, bit of a trouble for Lando Norris potentially brewing with that incident at the end of the pit lane where he stopped and then restarted again. It was noted by the stewards, is now under investigation. So we will keep you abreast of how that pans out. Down in the pits, a lot of work going on. Alex Albon's Williams car celebrating 800 Grand Prix with a special livery with a Union Jack flag embedded into the rear end of that Williams in blue. And Albon finishing third yesterday. His teammate Logan Sargent is out on track. Logan was fifth as well, so one of his better showings on a Friday for the American rookie. For a team that has struggled so much, Sam, overall in the last decade, really. This is exciting to see. We don't want to get ahead of ourselves because we don't, as Andrew said right at the start, we don't want to presume what kind of fuel load they were running. But based off of Albon's performance, especially in the last couple of rounds, there is definitely an upwards trend coming here.
There is, but let's not get too excited. You know, Williams has struggled for numerous reasons. The last 2 decades, really. Ever since BMW left as a manufacturer partner, I think that things have not been the same. Obviously, they had that one win in Barcelona 2012 with Pastor Maldonado, but ever since, really, they had that decent stint, didn't they, with Mercedes in 2014-15.
Yeah,
that was decent. But since then, again, nothing. I think that the leadership, though, of James Vowles, that he's bringing in some key personnel. I think Alexander Albon as their lead driver, yeah, it's looking up. But it's one thing to go out there and score the odd point every now and again. It's another thing to then threaten for podiums on a regular occasion, and that's where Williams wants to be, but it's a big jump in order to do that.
And they themselves said yesterday after their free practice running that they were a bit surprised at how high up they were. So just trying to keep their heads screwed on and make sure they can make the most of what is ahead of them for this session. Of course, the home Grand Prix, as Sargent goes 6th fastest.
I was excited. I mean, as a British racing driver, Williams was the team that gave me my first ever opportunity in Formula One. So my first ever go in a Formula One car was 2007 at Kemble Airfield in a Nico Rosberg Williams
F1 like a straight
car.
line test or something?
Yeah, so when they were moving to all the McLaren technology ECU work and dash, I had to go and do hundreds and hundreds of defaults on the dash flat out. And I was loving it. And I got paid to do it. So my first ever outing in a Formula 1 car, I got paid for. So I've got that check actually on my wall. I never cashed it in.
Really?
I've got the check. Yeah, because
save it for a rainy day.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't millions of pounds. It was a couple of hundred. But it meant the world to me. Still does. I've got great fondness for that racing team. Great fondness for Sir Frank. And what he built, what he stood for. He was a true racer. I'd dearly love Williams to come back strong, and I think that under the leadership of James Vowles, they've got every opportunity to do so.
They certainly do. More than 100 wins, 7 Drivers' Championships, 9 Constructors' titles, and running a livery on both cars this weekend to celebrate their past glories, and of course their founder, Sir Frank Williams. No one, I think, ever has a bad word to say about Williams. It's a team that everybody wants to do well, and going well so far. You just heard the sound of Lewis Hamilton, the 7-time world champion, in his Mercedes as he comes around the final corner now to set a lap time to put himself up into second, just under a 10.5 back from Max Verstappen, who currently has the fastest time of a 1:28.8. Then it's Hamilton, Leclerc, Russell, Sainz, the top 5, Norris, Piastri, Gasly, Ocon, Perez, the top 10, Sargent, Tsunoda, De Vries, the last with representative lap times, Alonso, Stroll, Albon, Magnussen, all on outlaps at the moment, and we've still not heard from Zhou Guanyu in the Alfa Romeo, Nico Hülkenberg in the Haas, or the other Alfa Romeo of Valtteri Bottas, all still firmly in the pits. We spoke a lot about the AlphaTauris yesterday, particularly Nick de Vries and under pressure. But they've got a huge upgrade package that they've brought this weekend. Pretty much everything is either being changed or they've added extra bits on the car. But it didn't seem to yield much.
I mean, sometimes when you bring so many upgrades, it can be difficult to get them to all work together. I mean, you've got this, theoretically it's worth 0.6 or 0.8 of a second, and you go there all optimistic, and then you put it on the car, and the setup that you need is different to the setup that you're used to. So it takes a little bit of time to find it, or one component doesn't work as well as they thought, and then everything else falls around it. So maybe they're finding something like that. I'm sure that they'll get it right, but sometimes these things take more than one weekend. We're going on board right now with Fernando Alonso going down the back straight towards Stowe, DRS open on the medium compound tyre as Carlos Sainz goes quickest on a 27.964. Actually, we saw Max Verstappen improve as well on the medium compound tyre, and he's 0.7 faster than his teammate on a similar tyre on the medium. I mean, Max Verstappen really is in a different league at the moment.
He certainly is, isn't he? Well, talk of upgrades, though. A lot of teams bringing them, and you had a great story yesterday about Michael Schumacher trying out a new front wing and breaking it in 2012.
Twice.
Monaco, twice.
Breaking it twice.
New one being flown in on his private jet.
He sent it back on his private jet back to Brackley. The mechanics fixed it overnight, put it back on his private jet. The next day, he got on pole position. Amazing. Amazing.
Sustainability.
Smashing the ground into turn 9 quite a bit with the right.
Copy that.
So this is the sound of Esteban Ocon. So he's smashing into the ground at turn 9. So that's Copse, the fast right-hander, as he makes his way through it now and takes a little bit of curb on the exit. The vibrations send the wheel shaking in his hand. And this is the sound of Leclerc, who's just having a little bit of a wobble on the rear end of his Ferrari as he comes through Village turn 3. Now, I believe, Rosanna, we have a Lando Norris update after that little issue at the end of the pit lane.
Yes, he actually still had one of the cooling bungs in the car, in the air intake, which is the bit above where the driver sits. So they'd forgotten to take that out. That's what I'm hearing down in the pit lane. So just a little bit of process issue going on with the McLaren team, and Lando's now back in the garage. A lot of Floviz paint all over the back of his car, that green highlighter colour that the team spray over the car to find out how the air is travelling over the bodywork, and the mechanics now are frantically scrubbing it off. So they've obviously got the data they needed from that bit, and I'm sure he'll be sent out fairly shortly.
All right, thank you very much, Rosanna. Well, that incident is still under investigation by the FIA stewards without an outcome just yet. On front wings, Andrew Benson, you said you had a great front wing story that you were going to tell us at dinner last night. I don't remember hearing it.
I can't even remember what I was thinking of.
All right, we'll give you time. Have a think about it, and we'll see if it's worth chatting about. With 46 minutes and 39 seconds remaining of free practice 3. Was it to do with Mercedes? Because we were chatting about Schumacher and Mercedes. That was his last poll, or was it an off-the-record chat that was only for dinner table conversation?
I honestly can't remember.
Bewilderment on Benson's face. He'll keep thinking. Yeah, producer Paddy. Yeah, it was about upgrades. Yeah, we know. No, he's still thinking. Right, cars on track then, as it's starting to get a little bit darker. We look outside the commentary box window, and the clouds are definitely looming large over this circuit. 3.66 miles, just over 5.8 kilometres long as well. And this will be the 74th British Grand Prix on Sunday. So amazing kind of feat.
It is amazing. Do you know what else is amazing? Is the fact that this circuit is, I think it's 5 metres long, no, 30 metres longer in total length than if you were to draw a straight line from the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium to the Emirates Stadium. Now, don't ask me why I know this, people, but I just know it. It's a true fact.
And that is why, Sam Bird, you are
a fountain of knowledge, mate.
Yeah, absolute. Took the words right out of my mouth. You're a fountain of knowledge. Talk about how many races. The first race here, 1950, officially as a Grand Prix. But the first actual race here, the 1942 Mutton Grand Prix, named after a sheep, was sadly killed in the process, I think. So bit of a sour note on that. But there you go. There's some fountain of knowledge for you. This is the sound of Lance Stroll in the Aston Martin, making his way around the final corner now. He is just popped himself up to 5th fastest on the medium compound tyre, a 1:28.7 for him. It's Sainz and Leclerc who are currently fastest at the moment. Then it's Verstappen, Russell, Stroll the top 5, Perez, Alonso, Hamilton, Norris, Tsunoda the top 10, Ocon, Sargent, Piastri, Gasly, De Vries the top 15, Magnussen, Albon, Bottas, Hulkenberg and Zhou, who has done an exploratory lap and has then come into the pits at the end of it. So Zhou Guanyu in the Alfa Romeo had some issues yesterday with his steering wheel. I think he had a steering wheel change midway through the practice session. So I wonder what's going on down at Alfa Romeo in Zhou Guanyu's side of the garage. Meanwhile, the running continues on track. This is the sound of Alex Albon making his way out through the pit lane entrance to your right. Then you slam onto the brakes and into the last 3 corners of this track, the right-hander, and then the final corner, which brings you out onto the main straight, the Hamilton straight, up through the gears, and it's 11th fastest for Alex Albon, a 1:29.1 on the medium compound tyre.
So the only people to really run aggressively on the softs are the 2 Ferraris and the 2 Mercedes. Everybody else right now is focusing on medium compound tyre work, as Hamilton is going pretty quickly actually at the moment on his set of soft tyres. He's in the final sector, through Stowe Corner, towards the final chicane, heavy braking at about 70 metres, gets the curb on the inside, still the rear of the car looks unhappy. Whenever he turns in, he has to then turn out of every single corner. And he goes P1, fastest final sector, on a 1:27.9.
Well, despite then the rear not playing nicely with both Mercedes, actually, still there is some lap time in that Mercedes.
Yeah, there is some lap time, but as well, it's not just about doing a one-off fast lap. It's about repeatability. Now, he's done that fast lap now, but can that be replicated for three sessions in qualifying later? And you know, it's all good and well being able to do it once. You need to be able to do it again and again and again, because otherwise it's too difficult, too tricky, as Charles Leclerc is going very quickly right now.
Yeah, he's making his way through the right-hander of Stowe now. It's purple first sector, purple middle sector as well. This is looking very good for Charles Leclerc, who didn't get any running yesterday in FP2, confined to the garage with an electrical issue, and just has one more corner to go to see where this lap puts him across the line, and it's looking like it's going to be the fastest, and it is. He finds half a second to go fast. It's a 1:27.4 on that soft compound tyre ahead of Hamilton and Sainz, who are also all on the softs.
There was a new camera angle there, Sam, wasn't there?
Yeah.
Behind the driver's shoulder. So instead of it wasn't a driver eye cam in the helmet, but it wasn't the above the head camera. Now it was compromised in a way because the halo's kind of in the way, but it gave a great impression of how the driver sinks down under braking. And some of the data that's been coming up on the screen this weekend: 5G through COPS, 5G through the most extreme one of the Beckett swerves. It's always more than 5G under braking, and we saw Leclerc sink. His helmet moved down by quite a few centimetres as he braked into the veil there, and it was a really good demonstration of the forces that the drivers are being subjected to around this Silverstone track.
Yeah, the forces subjected in Formula One are huge, longitudinally and laterally, especially around here. You get some enormous G-forces, as we've just said, over 5.5 Gs sometimes, for, in some cases, a prolonged period of time. And doing that for, 52 laps in a row, it takes a lot of fitness. You need great strength. Piastri radio?
So lightning towards turn 15. Outside of turn 15. Copy.
And you sink down in the seat when you hit the brake pedal. When I was at Mercedes on one of their previous simulators, we trialed like an aircraft kind of seat, whereby when I would hit the brake pedal, the seat inside the simulator would duck down and move forwards to simulate kind of
what your body was doing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then we had in the seat air kind of pads that would then press against my body to simulate, kind of the flex within the body as well, going through corners. We also had things like a pad behind the head that would push my head forwards. All these things are trying to prepare you in the simulator, and it's violent when you're driving the car.
And one of the things that was incredible yesterday watching the in-car cameras was the G-forces that I was talking about, where they were measured on Max Verstappen's car, and this will be the same. Here's Sargent's radio.
Something just blew off, and I have crazy hot air hitting my arm.
Okay, are you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine. Man, it's so hot.
I don't know what that's about. Something stopped the cooling in the Williams on Logan Sargent's car. But I was just saying that when you're seeing Max Verstappen going through the Beckett swerves, what Nigel Mansell used to famously call, we used to call it a 9G snap over. No, Nigel, it's just 4.5G one way and then 4.5G the other. Anyway, and his head doesn't move.
No.
It's incredible the strength of the neck muscles on Formula One drivers, and they all look like they'd need like a sort of size 18 collar shirt, and with super long arms, and must have their shirts tailor-made or something.
Yeah, Formula One drivers these days, they are cardiovascularly brilliant, and they've got monster necks. But the rest of it, they're quite sort of slim and
measly,
and sort of slight. Whereas GP2 back in my day, when I was doing GP2. When you had the car Sergio Perez.
There might be a few spots around turn 15, but just expecting light rain initially. Got a 25-minute window here.
Yeah, when we had full caster, ground effect, high aero, Bridgestone-tired GP2 cars with no power steering, we were all kind of little hulks, monsters with big necks as well. It was quite funny to see the change and how the regulations dictate the human inside as well, and the body shape and size that we need to be. Can you remember when we had the minimum driver weights in Formula One 8, 9, 10 years ago, and you had people at Hulkenberg going on a ridiculous diet? Sergio Perez, I think, complained as well at one point that he had to lose 4 kilos before a race weekend, and all he could eat was like a lettuce leaf for the week building up to it.
Yeah, it wasn't so much minimum driver weights as there was a defined limit for the car and the driver together, which there still is.
But it was way too low.
It was so low that people like Hulkenberg, Mark Webber, exactly. I mean, Esteban Ocon looks like a rake anyway. I think it's just his natural physique. But those two particularly, I remember speaking to Mark Webber about, couldn't have any carbs ever all year basically, and it was really difficult for the taller drivers at that in those days when before they managed to make the weight limit, the combined weight limit, a little bit more achievable for drivers, for the larger drivers. I mean, back in the day, the sort of Nigel Mansell, Alain Prost era, the driver weight wasn't even counted. So Mansell weighed like a lot more than Prost. People would say that, the maths will be, I'm not sure about the exact maths, but he would have to drive like 3 or 4 tenths faster just to be on the same pace as Alain Prost because of the size difference between the two of them.
It's raining, I believe, and lightning has been spotted, not least by Oscar Piastri. What more do we know, Rosanna?
I've just heard from Mercedes that they're expecting rain in, well, I was told about 2 minutes ago, but 10 minutes time, and that was from their chief race engineer Andrew Shovlin telling the team to be ready in 10 minutes time. So yes, I'm actually in the pit lane trying to do the classic sort of engineer check with my hand out, just waiting for any raindrops. Nothing too severe in the pit straight, I have to say, at the moment.
Well, Amit, #BBC1, I can confirm the rain is in Bicester, and that was a couple of minutes ago, so it might well be making its way over here imminently. It has certainly got a lot darker outside of our commentary box. We're just over the Haas team looking out onto the main straight as the Williams come streaming past. This is the sound of Alex Albon around the final corner.
Okay, Checo, there's some rain about to hit turn 15. Looks harder than expected.
A really good lap from Albon, up into second on the soft compound tyre, just over a tenth and a half up, and you just heard Sergio Perez's radio there. So rain approaching from turn 15, so towards the back end of the circuit, the right-hander of Stowe, so let's watch out for that. 35 minutes and 35 seconds remaining of this final practice session before we get into qualifying later this afternoon, and the race control have just declared a wet track, as we can see images of the cloud cover bearing down, approaching this 3.6 mile track, and if you can find a bit of cover, if you're in the grandstands, it might well be worth thinking about it, as the rain looks like it is imminent. I just wanted to pick up on your very interesting chat about drivers and the stresses they go through. We have an 11th team here this weekend, Apex Grand Prix, with Brad Pitts at the wheel, and he is actually going around in it's a slightly altered F2 car made to look like an F1 car, but he must have had to go through a fair bit of training to even drive that.
Well, as Lewis Hamilton said on Thursday, Brad Pitt's in pretty decent shape. Anyone who's seen Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the guy was, 55 when he filmed that? And I tell you, he's got a body to put most of us to shame. But I had a tour of the Apex Grand Prix pit this morning, actually. And it's incredible. It's just like a normal pit. In actual fact, I heard that some of the teams were looking at it on Thursday thinking, we could maybe make ours look a bit better if we did that. And it's an Apple movie. You would imagine there's a lot of Apple products in there. So it's all designed in a way that, is fitting with the Apple design motif, if you like. Other electronic components are available if you want to buy a different kind of smartphone or computer, of course. Brad Pitt's car wasn't there. That's in the old pits on the run down to Copse. And there's two of them, and they've got intra-car comms. They can talk to each other when they're on the track. Brad Pitt and the other driver, the other actor, who's in the film. And there's a third car that goes around with them to film, which I think is a kind of endurance type car. But yeah, and all the film crew are on there. They're parked between the Mercedes and the Ferrari garages, and it's very impressive. Brad wasn't in the garage this morning, but his double was. So I had to do a bit of a double take for a minute.
Dear.
But yeah, super impressive. And obviously people were saying, how can a 59-year-old actor play a racing driver? And there are question marks about, the believability of that. But obviously the character in the film presumably won't be 59. And as Lewis Hamilton was saying on Thursday, Brad Pitt does look like he's sort of aging backwards, doesn't he? Anyway, I was hearing about, the sort of micro detail that Hamilton's been going into with the script, saying things like, that wouldn't quite work like that, it would more work this way. And so they're taking the believability of the whole plot, the way it looks, the way it feels to people who are watching very, very seriously. I would be surprised from what I'm hearing, for example, if there are any of those stupid shots where you see a driver's foot suddenly go all the way to the floor as if he hadn't been trying before. We're just seeing a shot. Sam's pointing at Lando Norris's McLaren, a replay from earlier. Obviously something that was left in the car. But yeah, it's very impressive, as you would expect from a Hollywood-funded, Apple-funded movie.
Yeah, there is no expense spared. I managed to have a little gander down there earlier. But Rosanna, I think you're out there now, and it really is. The attention to detail is something else.
It's incredible. They're actually filming in the pit lane right now. We've got several cameramen, an incredible jib, getting shots of 4 actors and actresses on the pit wall.
Yeah, it's raining a lot in the turn 18 to 19, and I am staying out. Copy. I won't take risk, but I'm staying out.
Understood.
Charles, I agree with you wholeheartedly. It is raining in the pit lane, and I'm staying out as well. So they are filming this film, as Andrew's been talking about. Actors on the pit lane, in the pit wall, or on the pit wall at the moment, and they're getting a real dose of what it's really like to go racing at Silverstone. The rain is teeming down in the pit lane, but the actors and actresses aren't going anywhere. A lot of camera kit covered in plastic bags. I'm sure there's a technical word in Hollywood for that. And they've also got the timing boards that you often see members of the team hanging over the pit wall, and there's one for Pierce and one for Hayes being the character that Brad Pitt's playing, and it's all very high spec, and it's very, very realistic. It's just like watching an 11th team. It's fascinating, and that's on the pit wall. And then, as Harry mentioned, as you head into the pit lane and look into the garages, you could be fooled for thinking this is a fully fledged Formula One team, such as the setup. So yeah, they're doing it properly. I'm really excited to see how this turns out, but I hope they weren't filming yesterday. The continuity is going to be a bit off, as we had bright blue skies yesterday, didn't we, at 29 degrees. It's a little different today, but hey, I'm sure they can fix it in post.
Yeah, exactly. Well, they were running a little earlier in between this session and the F3 race from this morning, so they have been out on track. But talking of on track, It has been raining, and now everybody has come into the pits. In fact, everybody was in the pit lane, bar Charles Leclerc, who was still running out there on the soft compound tyre, had a little runoff into the runoff area and is now slowly making his way towards the end of Sector 2 now, and has just been told to box.
It's interesting to hear Charles Leclerc there say that he's staying out, because he was struggling in Austria in the wet conditions on the Saturday, and he said after qualifying there that that's become a pattern that he's realised. If people have cast their minds back to Spain, he thought there was something wrong with the car. He was so off the pace in qualifying there in the rain, and he ended up qualifying 19th. But then when it happened again in Canada and then it happened again in Austria, he realised something was wrong. So I think he's been out there for the last 2 laps with no one else around, on slicks, in wet conditions, just trying to work out, trying to learn what he might have been doing wrong, put into practice some of the things he's been talking about with the team since Austria. I
also think, Andrew, that it's a case of just doing a little bit of homework. We know that the weather today could be quite intermittent and changeable conditions, which would mean that at some point teams and drivers are going to have to make a decision. Right, is it slicks or is it intermediates? Like, what tyre do we go to at what specific time? What's the grip level feel like right now? Can we stay on the slick, or do we have to go to the intermediate? He's now got an idea, more so than all the other drivers, of right, it's definitely at this point with this amount of water, it's definitely going to an intermediate tyre now. So he's banked a little bit of experience there that all the others don't have. So I think it was worth staying out there for the extra 2 laps. The car's still fine. He didn't put it in the gravel or in the barrier. So I think that's a job well done and something learned for Charles Leclerc.
And also important when you're struggling for confidence in those sorts of conditions as a driver. You want to have that extra information to add into the knowledge bank, don't you?
Absolutely.
Well, the umbrellas have gone up. The Pacamacs are well and truly on. The ponchos too. And the packed grandstands remained packed, because we all love seeing Formula One cars and being here at Silverstone for the British Grand Prix. Even the pizza boxes are being reused. A great way of recycling a pizza box and covering yourself from the rain, which is coming down. And Chris on hashtag BBC1 saying it's definitely raining at Stowe. Kaylee as well. It is raining all through the track now, so it's well and truly arrived. All the cars then have come back into the pits with less than half an hour remaining. So we had the dry running. Leclerc was fastest with a 1:27.4. Albon, Alonso the top 3. Gasly, Hamilton the top 5. Sainz, Sargent, Verstappen, Russell, Tsunoda the top 10. De Vries, Norris, Stroll, Perez, Magnussen the top 15. Ocon, Piastri, Bottas and Hülkenberg, the 19 drivers who set a lap time. Zhou Guanyu, curiously, in the Alfa Romeo, has been out there to do a couple of exploratory laps, but no lap time set, and it was only registered doing 2 laps. So I wonder if there are any issues going on with Zhou Guanyu in his Alfa Romeo. They had some issues yesterday as well, where they had to do a bit of a steering wheel change at the request of Zhou. So we'll wait and see if anything develops there. But there isn't any track action for long, because coming out of the pits and getting a little slide on the rear as he puts the foot down out of the pit lane, it's Lando Norris to give the British fans something to cheer about in the re-liveried chrome McLaren, still keeping the papaya orange but intertwined with a bit of old school chrome from the Vodafone McLaren Mercedes days. And Norris is out on the track, and he has come out, I believe he is, it says on the medium compounded tyre. Is he on the intermediates? Yeah,
definitely on a set of intermediates. Yeah. The track in some areas looks fairly dry. It's just in certain areas. So you've got down the back straight going towards Stowe Corner, and towards the end of the lap, Sector 3 definitely looks much wetter than the beginning of the lap. So the rain hasn't quite hit the entire circuit yet. So the rain is coming from Stowe, going through the track in sort of like a northeasterly direction.
Well, Albon then decides to join Norris on track, and we are seeing some more cars start to make their way out now. Carlos Sainz is on an out lap. Oscar Piastri too has gone out, and they are all going out on the intermediate tyre then, with 25 minutes and 41 seconds remaining of this final practice session. Rosanna, how's it in the pit lane?
Well, I'm down at Zhou Guanyu's garage at Alfa Romeo, and his car isn't going anywhere fast. The front wing is off, that's on a stand. The car is up on stands as well, with mechanics working underneath it, around it. The back of the car is fully exposed, so the engine cover is off. And there are a lot of hurrying mechanics around the place, trying to get the job done as quickly as possible. With less than half an hour left on the clock, he's going to want to get out there, especially in these changeable conditions. But at the moment, he's out of the car.
Yeah, surprisingly not that bad anywhere, I would say. Just turn 7, probably the wettest.
Understood.
That was Lando Norris on the radio there, giving the feedback for the conditions. Thanks, Rosanna, for the Zhou update. So it's not been the best of starts for Alfa Romeo and Zhou Guanyu this weekend. Still a lot of work to go on down outside that garage, or inside that garage.
So Lando Norris just reported that turn 7 feels the wettest. I think it's a combination of it being damp, wet at turn 7, but also turn 7, which is Luffield, the old final corner on this track, was absolutely the most treacherous corner yesterday in dry conditions. It was somewhere that everybody looked like it was a challenge. The rear of the car was moving around. I think there's a different macro roughness down at that particular corner, so that the asphalt is a different age compared to other sections of the track.
Okay.
So I think that the way that the moisture is held on the surface, and also the grip level there, is different to other parts of this track.
So is that almost saying that there's different types of almost, let's say, tarmac on the track, and some bits are older than others, so they could, maybe the water is not dissipating as quickly as on another part in the same location?
Yeah, typically the circuits that we go to around the year, they will relay certain areas and aspects of the circuit. It won't be the whole thing every single year. So the surface at Luffield, I haven't seen the FIA notes whether it's brand new or whether it's a little bit older, and that's why we're seeing some struggling at that particular corner. Sometimes when they relay and redo a corner and it's brand new, you get the oil coming to the surface.
Do you want to put a slick on, or?
Yeah, we are keen to do that.
Yeah, same.
So they're going to try the crossover now as well. You see that there is a little bit of spray, but certainly in some areas of the track, Lando thinks it's dry enough to go to probably a soft compound tyre.
Yeah, so looking out of our commentary box window now, we could definitely see the rain that was pounding down, but it has ceased just from the naked eye. But it is a rather large track here, so it could well be raining on the other side of the track. But as we see Charles Leclerc make his way through Maggotts and Beckett's, kicking up a little bit of spray from the rear end of that Ferrari. He's still out there on the intermediate tyres. And who else has come to join him? Albon is out there, Gasly, Sainz, Sargent, Russell, Tsunoda, De Vries, Ocon and Bottas all heading out now. Here is George Russell.
It's spit in turn 3 to 7, but it's...
Thank you very much, George. Exactly what we were looking for there. So, it's really good. Well, funny enough, it's called practice 3, isn't it? It's good practice for these drivers to underline and get to know when is that crossover time, because actually, you could make the argument of it's wet. We're probably not going to get a wet Grand Prix. Qualifying later doesn't look like it's going to be pouring it down the rain. Why bother? Why risk?
This homework is imperative. If we continue to have this kind of weather pattern throughout the rest of the day, knowing what tyre works in what condition is absolutely vital. So George Russell there has basically told us and everybody else down the pit lane, look, it's damp, but I can handle it, but it's definitely slicks. The lap time is quicker on slicks, and teams will figure that out for themselves. But it'll make qualifying really exciting. I mean, if there's parts of the track that are damper than others, and we've got mistakes going on, we've got weather that comes and goes, we could be in for a great qualifying session.
Certainly one that you're going to want to be here for. Here's Sainz.
More rain expected in 4 to 5 minutes. I leave it to you to don't damage the tires.
More rain in about 5 minutes' time, Carlos Sainz being told.
And then you've got to make sure that you're on track at exactly the right moment to hit the best weather conditions possible. Typically we see some of the bigger teams waiting, let the smaller teams clean the track at the beginning of qualifying sessions. If then it rains after 3 or 4 minutes in qualifying and the big guns haven't gone out there, they'll struggle to qualify. You might see a very topsy-turvy grid.
And that's what we love to see, isn't it? We love a bit of a fight back in the Grand Prix. And that would be Stella Silverstone on Sunday, won't it? 20 minutes then and 35 seconds remaining of this final practice session. And cars coming out for some exploratory laps after the rain came down on the intermediate tyre. And a few deciding that actually it is ready for slick. Still wet in some parts of this track, particularly the early part, but drying out quite rapidly. Yuki Tsunoda in the AlphaTauri is making his way around now through the right-hander of Luffield, turn number 7, and will make his exit out through Woodcote, and then on the throttle into the approach of the fast right-hander of Copse. Tsunoda, who says we still need to get a bit more out of these huge upgrades that AlphaTauri have brought this weekend in an effort to get themselves off the bottom of the constructors' leaderboard at the moment. They have a couple of points, but it's 10th place for them, and 5 is what splits them between their nearest rivals. Williams, who are in 9th, then it's Alfa Romeo ahead of them, another couple of points, and then Haas in 7th, who managed to get Alfa Romeo last time out, courtesy of Nico Hülkenberg picking up a few points. So that midfield towards the back end of the field is so tight between the Haas's, the Alfa Romeos, the Williams and the AlphaTauris. Less than 10 points separating all of those teams. So that just proves how pivotal it is when you bring upgrades, getting the most out of them, understanding them as quickly as possible. And it seems AlphaTauri might well be a little bit on the back foot so far this weekend with understanding where they are at. And they'll be looking at the speed of Williams and perhaps grimacing slightly.
Absolutely. I think it's worrying times at the moment for AlphaTauri. The car is not functioning the way that they want it, as we spoke about earlier in the broadcast.
This is why
they've brought a ton of upgrades, and they're not working currently. They will learn and understand why, as we see Lando Norris running wide at Stowe. Obviously track conditions very difficult in this area on the track. We know Sector 3 is slightly wetter, but going back to AlphaTauri, it is a struggle right now. They've also got this worry about this, their, let's call it number 2 driver, Nick de Vries.
A little bit of rain here.
You're right. You're definitely right, Lando. There's all this talk about Nick de Vries. Is he staying? Is he going? Is he going to lose his seat? Is he going to keep his seat? Who's going to come in if he loses his seat? And it's detracting away from them focusing on, right, Nick, you're our man, you're a driver, we believe in you, go out and do the job. Would he have scored a couple of points by now? I think so, if they showed a bit more confidence in him. Yeah, absolutely. But that's the way that they tend to deal with their drivers.
Well, the other thing going on though at AlphaTauri is they've had, they're losing their team principal in the year. Franz Tost is stepping aside and retiring, but they've had this whole hoo-hum over their management, and there was rumours about were Red Bull going to sell the team. They're not, and Dr. Helmut Marko is coming out and saying, well, we're going to rename the team next year. AlphaTauri, that deal runs out at the end of this year, and it was Toro Rosso then renamed AlphaTauri to promote Red Bull's clothing brand. Just a slight diversion, because we're seeing a nice bit of tasty fight on track between Ocon and Norris, coming oh so closer to the approach of the right-hander of Copse. Norris is out there on the soft compounder tyre, so he's trying the slick and is having a few snaps as he's making his way around the track. So it is certainly drying, but it's still maybe a lap or so to go before he'll feel a bit more stable. To finish the Red Bull point off, they're going to bring it closer and back in hand to Red Bull. That surely, they can't have one team at the top and one team at the bottom. Even though it is a sister team, the idea is to promote their young talent. But if they're 10th and languishing in last, it's not a good look for Red Bull.
No, it's not, but what can they do right now? Because at AlphaTauri, that car is completely produced by them now. So what do you do? Do you say, right, well, we're not going to go down that method anymore, we're going to just have last year's Red Bull? And then they've made all this facility out in Italy, and they're not going to use it? What happens then? I mean, and then they're just a copy team, a copy B team. I don't think they'll want to go down that route. I think that they'll want to maybe get a little bit of help, but not go down the route that they've done before. A couple of minutes ago we saw Esteban Ocon get Esteban Ocon'd by Lando Norris, actually, who's one of the kinder, I think, drivers on the grid. And Ocon is one of the drivers to, let's say it, as it is, he gets his elbows out in the races. He really, just make sure that if you're going to pass him, you're going to have to work hard.
Ocon out there making his way around now. He's down in 16th, but that was on the medium compound tire. He set that lap. He's out there on the intermediates. Only car out there with him is Bottas at the moment. Everybody else has come into the pits. Helmut Marko said, the orientation is clear. Based on Red Bull Racing, as far as the regulations allow, do-it-yourself constructions are the wrong way. Now, I wonder then, are they going to try and basically make AlphaTauri, whatever they want to call it next year, a bit like a Haas and buy as many parts that they are allowed to from
it would make
Red
sense.
Bull?
Absolutely.
They're going to move the operation or the majority of it to... AlphaTauri do have a base in Bicester, so much nearer to Milton Keynes where Red Bull are based. So even though it will be a separate team, they'll almost do a Haas and go, well, okay, let's buy as much as we can, and then the rest will just try and fit around it, and it will be close to Milton Keynes. So there might be some sharing and helping out going on as far as the regulations allow. So it's not a bad decision.
No, of course, it's not a bad decision at all, and we've seen that done to some great success in the past with these two teams.
We expect the rain to stay this level until the end of the session.
But then, at some point, AlphaTauri will go, well, no, we feel like we can do it ourselves, and let's go and show them what we can do, and maybe we can become a contender, and then they go away, and then it doesn't work, and then they come back, and there seems to be this every 5, 6, 7 years, this revolving door that people go through with regards to upgrades and basically having an A and a B team.
Well, everybody is in the pits, bar Ocon and Bottas. You just heard Bottas's radio there being told by his engineer Alex Chan that the rain will be staying with us for the remainder of the 13 and a half or so minutes we have left. Rosanna, have you managed to get any cover at all?
Oh yes, it's actually a very nice pit lane to work in, I have to say. Nice and sheltered. We're just talking about Ocon still being on track. His mechanics have just run out to receive him, so he'll be coming in shortly. I think quite a bit of weight on his shoulders now to get some good running in, because Pierre Gasly, his car was being looked at by the mechanics underneath it, so they were having a good old look at the floor. The torch was out, some tape was being applied, and actually he's just taken his helmet off, Pierre Gasly, so I'm not sure whether he's just readjusting a few things. I think he is actually. He might just be making sure his hair's looking all okay under the balaclava. And actually Valtteri Bottas now coming in as well. More pressure on Bottas as well to gather the data at the moment, given that Joe's car is still up on the stands.
Yeah, it's not been a good day for Zhou in the Alfa Romeo at the moment. So Bottas peels into the pits, as does Ocon. They've decided enough is enough for their intermediate tyre running with 12 minutes and 46 seconds on the clock. Now, we have an 11th team here. We talked about the Apex Grand Prix filming this new movie with Brad Pitt and so on. It sparked a few quotes and comments from the likes of Toto Wolff, and we are... The bidding is open for some new teams to join us over the course of the next couple of years, 2025 onwards. First of all, Sam, how do you feel about having some new teams on the grid? Are you for it, against it?
I'm very 50-50 on this, because, yes, I'd love to see some more cars on the grid. Because when you've got the pictures going down towards Turn 1, 24, 26 cars looks much more impressive than 20 cars. It's just fact, and it would be great, and more cars going round, more fun for the fans. However, we saw an influx of teams in 2010. We had Lotus.
Lotus
Caterham,
Virgin
Marussia, and HRT. None of those really worked. None of them really to the challenge and stayed for a long period of time. I think the one to go last was Marussia.
Yes,
Marussia and Caterham, yeah, they hung around the longest, but they never did what, let's say, Haas has done now, which is build a car that can go and score decent points on relatively regular occasions. You know, Manor scored the single point with the late Jules Bianchi in Monaco, and the others didn't even manage a point. So I think everyone is concerned about that. What's the credibility of these teams? Would they be able to afford and fund multiple seasons in Formula One and go forwards and be successful? I'm really not so sure that it's a viable option for any other team right now.
Well, didn't those three teams that came in 2010, I feel like they came in under the promise of a cost cap, which never really delivered. And so they were always going to be up against it. Now, obviously, we've had the cost cap. But the main arguments that are coming out, at least publicly, are, we don't have space for an 11th team. Yes, we've got the garages here for the Apex Grand Prix, but Toto Wolff has been saying, well, at some tracks, and Christian Horner, it's just logistically impossible. But I don't know how you can really say that when we have had more teams than that.
It's been done before.
Exactly.
So
they're worried because more teams means they get a less piece of the pie, essentially. But... And as much as, that is Formula One, that is politics, they go hand in hand in this business. Here's Verstappen.
Tyres would be good for 2 laps in these conditions.
No, I think just one.
Yeah, so understood.
Okay, interesting. Verstappen is out there on the intermediates right now, along with Leclerc, Hamilton, Sainz, Russell and Perez, who have all just embarked on some outlaps. But to me, it just seems like it is very much a political money thing, because as far as I'm concerned, from a fan perspective, more teams, more drivers, more opportunities as well for not just young drivers coming up through the field, but also for people working in Formula One, whether that's engineering, mechanics, or on the pit wall, or tyre technicians, or marketing. That's a good look for Formula One, as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely. I mean, you'd effectively be opening up job opportunities for probably 1,000 people across 3 teams, so it would be amazing.
He's quite gone already, but anyway, we try.
So this is really interesting. You've got people now trying the intermediate tyre, and the intermediate tyre for Formula One is a great tyre. However, it's got quite a short lifespan, especially on a high-speed circuit like Silverstone. The rain is there, and the track is slippery, but it's not wet enough to really generate any cooling to these intermediate tyres. They're overheating, and then you're basically losing performance and grip, which is why Max Verstappen is saying, look, this tyre is going to last in these conditions 1 lap. They will last longer, you can run on them, but the peak performance of the tyre is on lap 1 currently, because it's simply not wet enough to do multiple laps on the tyre right now.
In that case, I think it's pretty good going that they're even out there going round.
Well, they've got to learn.
Yeah.
You've got to do your homework, because these are the conditions that are set for today. It's going to be wet, dry, wet, dry. They need to know things like this, like when is it a good time to put on the intermediate? How long does the intermediate last? Can I push it in a row? If I do a cool down, can I bring performance back again, or is it a case of the rubber is disappearing, or is it a temperature thing on the surface of the tyre?
And so for someone like Zhou Guanyu, who has had absolutely no running, how much, obviously it is on the back foot going into qualifying, but how much is he going to be able to then rely on his teammate? Is he going to be able to, looking through that data and trawling through what Bottas has collected? We know Valtteri's quite open about that with his teammate. How does a team then help a driver who has no experience of this track? And let's remember, Zhou actually hasn't technically never done a racing lap around this British Grand Prix track after his huge shunt last year. How much does that take away from his confidence?
It's not ideal, is it? But, he is now a seasoned professional in Formula One. I'm sure it'll be okay. It will be more challenging, absolutely, but he'll do the homework with his engineers and with Valtteri, who's clearly a great teammate to have, and he will help his teammate in any way that he can. You can't try and explain what to expect at what different corners, where's wettest, where's the slipperiest area, whether he was driving flat out or not.
That's Alonso just reporting. We're seeing that the wind has picked up, so the gusts are back here at Silverstone as he is making his way around in his Aston Martin, just making his way through Brooklands and into the right-hander of Luffield, Rosanna.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm down by the Williams garage. Both drivers sitting pretty in the cars at the moment. It's been an interesting weekend for them, hasn't it, so far? Just been talking to the Alfa Romeo team. I think it's an MGU-H problem for Zhou. So not great. Great to have it in this session, though. Hopefully they can get it fixed for qualifying later on. Of course, Alfa Romeo with work to do, although Zhou seemingly in better form than Valtteri Bottas of late. And it is a little bit dank and drizzly here. The weather definitely changing things up in FP3, and I've just been checking in on the weather forecast. It looks like there'll be a 30% chance of rain at 3 o'clock later on when we go live for qualifying, but I know that a certain Julian Palmer always likes to think positively, and that would be 70% chance of a dry session. So, you know, take from that what you will.
Well, it's certainly wet right now, and this is the sound of Fernando Alonso just teetering his way round the final corner, and just gets a little snap on the steering wheel. The rear steps out, and now he puts his foot to the floor and makes the run down to turn 1 with 5 minutes and 18 seconds remaining. It's Leclerc fastest, but that was all set on the dry running, the soft compound tyre that we had at the start. Albon, Alonso, Gasly, Hamilton, the top 5. Sainz, Sargent, Verstappen, Russell, Tsunoda, the top 10. De Vries, Norris, Stroll, Perez, Magnussen in the top 15. Ocon, Piastri, Bottas and Hulkenberg, the 19 drivers to set lap times. And as Rosanna was saying, MGU-H issues we're hearing for Zhou Guanyu in his Alfa Romeo. And actually, speaking of that, his teammate Valtteri Bottas, not having the best of runs this season. Audi are coming in.
Is it a case of Zhou's upped his game, or Bottas hasn't had a good season? I think it's probably a little bit of both. We're now seeing a little bit more rain on the visor of Checo Perez's helmet, going through Luffield and down what was the old pit straight. Interestingly, we just saw an onboard shot of Fernando Alonso. He's not using any of the curbs in the final sector. Now that's because obviously the curbs are painted, and they paint them with a sand-based paint, so it's got some grit and grip on them, but it still gives less traction and less grip than just the normal tarmac. So people tend to avoid curbs in the wet if you're a first-time listener to Formula One.
This is Checo Perez making his way down the hangar straight now. He's just navigated the technical and twisty and high-speed Magnussen and Beckett. Have a couple of goes on the steering wheel as he turns into the right hand of Stowe. He's got a car in front of him with the rain lights flashing. I think it's the Aston Martin of Lance Stroll, who just gets out of his way as Sergio Perez then makes his way around the final corner on that intermediate tyre and crossing the line. We're about 13, or Perez is about 13 seconds off the pace of Leclerc's soft running tyre from the dry running we had at the start of this session. It does look like the rain is getting a little bit heavier now, because the spray is starting to be kicked up. A bit more visibility certainly on the back straight, the hangar straight, starting to decline a little bit as it very much has gotten darker here in Silverstone, with 3 minutes left of this final practice session.
Do you want some lap time data?
Oh, please.
I've just been writing down the laps that the drivers are doing in these conditions. Now, obviously, you know, some of them will be risking more than others and blah, 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 so it's not necessarily a true picture, but Max Verstappen, unsurprisingly, is fastest on a 1 minute 38.580. No one's within, the only person within 2 seconds of him is Carlos Sainz on 1 minute 40.457. Then Leclerc 41.2, Hamilton 41.2, Alonso 42.6.
So Verstappen is 2 seconds faster than the next best guy.
Correct.
All right then, everyone, hold on to your hats. Qualifying is going to be a fun one. Gasly making his way around on track. In fact, everybody is now out on track, bar Zhou talked about Magnussen, Sargent and Albon, so the Williams duo not electing to go on track.
I mean, I think it's worth saying, I was speaking to Helmut Marko earlier, actually, the Red Bull motorsport manager, the guy who basically picks the Red Bull drivers, and he was talking about what an incredible job Verstappen's doing, how he's moved on to another level even from 2021, when he was already pretty amazing when he won his first title in that controversial finale in Abu Dhabi. How in control he seems at the moment. Okay, he's not being threatened, but I pointed out to Marko that, you know, there's quite a few people up and down the paddock at the moment. I've said this a couple of times on the radio in the last few races, that people are saying how much is Verstappen and how much is the car. You know, because everyone assumes the Red Bull's the best car. Obviously it is. But Perez isn't doing anything like what Verstappen's doing. And of course, Perez isn't the same quality of driver as Verstappen. But then that just underlines what an amazing driver Max Verstappen is. And so it might, while it might be depressing for neutrals to watch him win 5 races in a row, is it now? Heading into his 6th this weekend, potentially 7 races out of 9 this year. we're seeing a driver and a team operating at a level that Formula 1 has rarely seen in the past. And I think, as depressing as it is for neutrals, you have to appreciate that and give them respect for that.
Is this different from the dominance we've seen previously, from Hamilton, from Vettel?
I would say so. Wouldn't you, Andrew?
Well, the difference is that at the moment this isn't the same as Hamilton's domination, because Hamilton always had competition, either from his teammate in the case of Nico Rosberg or from Ferrari in 17 and 18. There were very few years when Hamilton absolutely swept everything before him. 2020 was a good example of that. Even Valtteri Bottas offered him some competition, but 17, 18, 19 Ferrari were opposition, particularly in 17 and 18, and in 14, 15, 16 Rosberg was, even if in 14 and 16 that competition was distorted by the fact the reliability record was twisted in Rosberg's favour, which is the only real reason that Hamilton struggled to beat him in those 2 years and failed to do so in 16. Verstappen's not got any competition at all at the moment. This is more akin to 2002 and 2004 with Michael Schumacher and Ferrari, or Williams in 1992 with Mansell, where Riccardo Patrese couldn't get on with the active suspended FW14B car. Verstappen's at a level that Perez isn't capable of being at, and Helmut was saying he doesn't believe that any other driver out there is capable of being at that level apart from Hamilton and Alonso. And I think that's a fair comment. And I actually think that go back to the previous Red Bull era, I don't think Sebastian Vettel was ever on the same level as Hamilton and Alonso as a driver, but the car was that much better. But he had competition from Mark Webber a lot of the time as his teammate. So yes, it is different in its nature, but only because of those reasons.
Well, checkered flag has come out to signal the end of free practice 3, with almost all cars out on track, finishing up their laps on their intermediate tyres as the rain well and truly coming down after we got the early part of this session underway in dry conditions. But Leclerc then set that fastest time early doors, 1:27.4. Alex Albon just over a tenth and a half back in the Williams, continues their good form up in second. Alonso third, Gasly and Hamilton the top 5. Sainz, Sargent, Verstappen, Russell, Tsunoda the top 10, De Vries, Norris, Stroll, Perez, Magnussen the top 15, Ocon, Piastri, Bottas and Hülkenberg, the 19 drivers who took part in this session. Zhou Guanyu confined to the pits for the majority with an MGU-H issue.
Thank you very much, Harry. Yes, an interesting session, mixed conditions, challenges for the teams and drivers being perhaps a little cautious towards the ends of FP3 just then, so they're ready for qualifying. Pierre Gasly hoping for a little bit more rain this afternoon. I think a few drivers would like that jeopardy this afternoon, maybe giving them a chance to start further up the order come tomorrow afternoon's British Grand Prix. My thanks to Harry Benjamin, Sam Bird and Andrew Benson for talking us through that last session. FP3 is now completed. The next time we'll talk to you is just before qualifying, and that you can follow on the BBC Sport website. Thank you to everyone for tuning in. We'll be back later on. Will it be rainy? Will it be sunny? Join us to find out. Goodbye.